Hello, everyone. My name is Jack Hanna, and I'm a Biden delegate to the Democratic National Convention from Portland, Oregon. I'm also the former Pennsylvania State Party Chair and Treasurer, and a member of the Coalition of a National Infrastructure Bank. Welcome to our second presentation of the Coalition. Those of you that have seen the first presentation's four segments will recognize many of our panelists today. They include academic authorities, elected officials, union representatives, and urban and rural advocates. All express their support and reasons for the creation of a national infrastructure bank. The official Democratic Party platform references an infrastructure bank and its possible use as an economic tool or vehicle to jumpstart our economy and create millions of jobs. But what exactly is it? What is its history, and how will it work? These and other questions will be addressed by our panelists today. And our first to do so is Alfecca Mutardi, who will talk about the bank and its pending legislation in Congress, H.R. 6422, for its creation. Our second presenter is historian Stephen Fenberg, who will describe the latest iteration of a national bank created under FDR, the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. Alfecca, if you will please go first and then be followed by Stephen. Alfecca, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Alfecca Mutardi, and I am a macroeconomist with the Coalition for a National Infrastructure Bank. And our proposal on the table is H.R. 6422, which has been recently introduced into the House of Representatives by Congressman Danny Davis of Illinois and co-sponsored by Seth Moulton of Massachusetts. I would like just take a minute, if it's okay with you, to explain to you how this bank works, how it differs from other proposals to pay for infrastructure, and what it'll do for our economy, especially in this COVID-19 world. So first of all, this bank has actually been done 4 times before. The first iteration was Alexander Hamilton and George Washington's first bank of the United States. The final iteration, which Stephen is going to talk a lot more about, is FDR's Reconstruction Finance Corporation. This iteration around, what we did was to ask ourselves the question, if we were not constrained by budgets in any way, what would it take, how much will we need to fix all of our nation's infrastructure? And that's an important question because for the last 40 years, we haven't had enough to fund this infrastructure through the normal channels, which are budgets and bond creation by state and local governments. So we went to the Society of Civil Engineers, and they said we would need at least 4.6 trillion just to bring things up to a state of good repair. And that is in the areas of roads, bridges, airports, rail, a new electricity grid. In addition to that, and what they estimate is that at least half of it may be funded through normal sources, like the federal budget, like state and local bonds. But we want to be able to cover all of it in every single state. So we're topping up the money, another 2.1 trillion, which will be financed through the infrastructure bank. And then in addition, we want projects that the engineers are not covering currently, like high-speed rail. That's a 900 mile network throughout the United States along major economic corridors. We want broadband everywhere in rural areas so that farmers and their families can access for their farming business, for their education, for their healthcare support, and in inner city areas that are underserved as well. And we want more affordable housing than we've been able to eke out of the budget so far. We need something like 7 million new units across the United States. And we want some other large mega projects in the United States. So that brings us up to a total of $4 trillion. Now, how is this bank configured? It's configured like a commercial bank in that it needs to have capitalization and then it gives out loans. The HR 6422, what it does is creates a public deposit money bank, and that bank will be capitalized using existing treasuries that are held by the private sector. Those treasuries will be exchanged for preferred stock in the bank, and then those stockholders will be receiving about 2% more than they're earning on their treasuries in order to entice them to bring their deposits in. That 2% will initially come from the budget, but then will be paid out from the interest earnings from the bank. The idea is that this bank will take over all of the rest of the infrastructure financing needs of the country without adding anything on, any other burdens onto the federal budget as in the terms of new taxes or new increasing federal debt. And that's really important in this COVID world where our debt is just exponentially exploding. We hope that the bank will be able to finance these projects at the rock bottom interest rates. That is the Treasury bond rate or 2% floor. We think that the major borrowers from the bank would be state and local governments, anybody that owns public infrastructure. And so those loans will be spread across different balance sheets, states, counties, cities, municipalities, authorities, and that kind of thing. We are trying to entice to bring into the bank bundled projects. So instead of doing infrastructure in silo fashion, a mayor, for example, could come in with a project for affordable housing, mass transit to get folks from here to there to minimize traffic, really build out the infrastructure, replace the roads, put in broadband, fix the water pipes so that they don't have lead in them anymore. The idea is to be efficient in this and to dig up the road only once. We expect that a bank of this size, and that really the stellar thing that distinguishes this bank from all other proposals is its size. When you spend $4 trillion to fix the infrastructure, what you do is you have to go out and hire at least 25 million workers to do this work, and that'll be direct construction jobs and then related jobs that are linked through the economy through providing materials or ancillary services. Now, the bill calls at present for paying Davis-Bacon wages, Buy America Only, supports project labor agreements, and there are also provisions in the bill to support small businesses, especially disadvantaged businesses, to make sure that they get a fair share of their business out of this total investment package. We think that this will really supercharge the economy. Over the last 10, 20 years, we've had really sluggish economic growth, very low. We've had a very, and most of that growth, GDP growth, has gone to the upper income earners. Wages have been stagnant and workers have not been doing well at all. By paying them Davis-Bacon wages and directing this investment into the real sector and making sure that it's sustained over a long period of time, we really think that we can supercharge the economy, get growth rates up to the 5% level, and that will really be great for federal and state and local coffers too, because in this COVID world now where we have 30 million folks unemployed, many of the jobs will not come back. This bank will look for new workers, train them in these new permanent construction jobs that will have full benefits, and this will really be a boost to the economy and result in less folks on unemployment rolls and more folks with their own health insurance and paying income taxes, and that will really boost everybody's finances all the way around. So that's the plan in a nutshell. Now, in terms of this Democratic convention, what we noticed last evening was there was a strong emphasis on a new motto for the convention, which is Build Back Better. And this bank fully incorporates that. Not only does it build back better 21st century technologies, climate resilient infrastructure, but it is a concrete plan for doing it without increasing the burden on the budget. So now Stephen Fenberg would like to tell you about the last time we had a national infrastructure bank and what it did for our economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Alfecca. The good news is everything Alfecca described was done once before during the Great Depression and World War II. I am Stephen Fenberg, Jesse Jones's biographer. He was the chairman of the Reconstruction Finance Corporation during the Great Depression and World War II. President Herbert Hoover started the RFC during his last year in office, but he was reluctant to use the power of the federal government to address the calamity of the Great Depression, and the RFC's response then was inadequate. Thankfully, the United States Congress, right after Franklin Roosevelt was inaugurated, passed legislation that unleashed the power of the RFC. Fortune magazine reported that the stampede of fear had come to an abrupt halt because the RFC had been converted from one of prevention to reconstruction. And then FDR made Texas banker and developer and former former DNC finance chair Jesse Jones, the RFC's chairman. And then it took off. Here's what it did. First, it saved the American banking system and repaid depositors whose savings were locked up in closed banks. And this was before federal deposit insurance. Through judicious lending, not spending, and that's an important differentiation, the RFC went on to build tunnels, bridges, aqueducts throughout the nation. It helped bring electricity to rural citizens and help them buy appliances on credit so they can plug into the modern age. The RFC helped communities rebuild their towns and cities after natural disasters. It even saved the railroads and financed the development of high-speed trains. The RFC helped farmers store their crops until prices improved so they could save their land. And here's the icing on the cake. The RFC, during the nation's worst economic catastrophe, made money for United States taxpayers, you and me, while helping every citizen in the United States of America. A new infrastructure bank can do the same thing again today. It can bring broadband and internet connection to everybody in the United States, especially to people in remote areas. It can supply our children with computers so they can learn in and out of school. A new infrastructure bank can improve and fortify our electric grid system. A new infrastructure bank can respond to the devastation of the new coronavirus and climate change. It can help achieve the goals of the new Green Deal, just like Roosevelt's RFC helped him achieve economic recovery and then mobilize the nation for World War II. Roosevelt's RFC did not stop with economic recovery. 2 years before the Pearl Harbor attacks, the RFC began building gigantic factories and leasing them to corporations to build the ships, tanks, trucks, and airplanes required to fight and win World War II. It even orchestrated the development of synthetic rubber from the lab to mass production, just as the Japanese took over our supply of natural rubber in the Pacific Ocean. Without this direct federal government investment and initiative, the Allied forces would have been stuck in place and unable to fight. A new infrastructure bank can restore our nation. All it takes, we need to embrace the power of good government and feel patriotic when it helps our citizens. A new infrastructure bank will help us do the big things required of a great nation. So let's help President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris build back better with a new infrastructure bank. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Alfeka. Next, we're going to run through a group of questions for our panelists to answer. I'll read off the question and give each person named about a minute to respond after they identify themselves. So first, for Tara, Erica, Carl, and Tom, what do you think are the most pressing infrastructure needs of the nation and your region right now? For example, transportation, bridge, road repair, rail, schools. How do you foresee the National Infrastructure Bank helping to address those concerns? Tara.
I believe Tara's microphone might be off.
Give us one moment, please, and we'll address the technical issue. Just 1 second. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tara Zarinsky. I'm a Northampton County Councilwoman in Pennsylvania, and I want to focus on transportation needs as our county has been adversely impacted. The impact of COVID-19 has really varied across counties and states, but the full impact of the crisis has really forced extreme fiscal cuts in county services, project delays, workforce layoffs, and furloughs, as well as critical infrastructure investments. And since the onset of the pandemic, local governments have lost about 1.2 million jobs. These are clerks, human services workers, public transit employees, and others providing critical services to the community. And I sit on the Lehigh-Northampton Airport Authority Board of Governors, and I know that the airport is facing very difficult times because of the lack of passenger traffic and reduced flights, which are projected for the next 3 years. So funding from the CARES Act provided only temporary relief. With less air traffic comes increased road traffic for transportation of goods, and as corporations consider driving a safer way to travel for business, there's increased wear and tear on our roads. PennDOT is facing a $1 billion shortfall in revenue. The Lehigh Valley was already facing an estimated $380 million shortfall over the next 12 years for roads and bridges and trails. This is one of the steepest losses for a single region in the state. And COVID has really exacerbated this whole transportation issue. So while local governments tend to recover much more slowly from the shock, this is really going to be impacted because of decreased revenue from the state and also from local taxes. The Infrastructure Bank could greatly help as an intervention for these transportation needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. Erica, your turn. After you identify yourself, please answer the question. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hope you can hear me really well. My name is Erica White. I'm from Toledo, Ohio. Okay, we are the largest suburb to Detroit, Michigan. Sister city to Flint, Michigan. Give some shout outs here. And of course, I'm not a Cleveland Indians fan, but they're right up the street. So of course, where we are, those cities I named, including Toledo, we make up some of the communities are being the most hardest hit by what I'm going to talk about, which is broadband. So with COVID-19, and I forgot to add, I have to give out the biggest shout out. I'm from Communication Workers of America. I'm the president of Local 4319 out of Toledo, Ohio. And so I'm going to talk about broadband. And broadband, what COVID-19 has showed us is that we have to do something, right? We have some serious solutions to fixing our broadband infrastructure. And when we look at those disparities, especially when we look at our rural communities, we have communities as a rural communities that just don't have enough broadband, and we have other communities that have more than enough, okay? How can you have disparities when it comes to broadband if that's not crazy enough, correct? So this ain't your 80s broadband, this ain't your mama's broadband, right? Let's just take it like it is, right? We've got people teleworking, doing telemedical visits, we've got people going to school, we've got people applying for jobs, and let's not forget people applying for what? Unemployment. And we've seen what broadband means when over a decade ago, we've talked about it moving too slow. And Communication Workers of America has been beyond pushing broadband and also keeping carrier of last provider. I'm not saying that right, I'm sorry, but meaning that you can't just get up and leave out of rural communities without leaving them something. You can't just get up and not leave them something, okay? And that's what we're noticing a lot of these big corporations are doing. So we're talking about lack of abundant and affordable broadband, correct? So when we contribute, when we don't have that, that contributes or it pulls away from our economic growth, which we've seen, and it puts the American economy behind. So I just want to give a statistics. For every $1 billion that we put into, like what we're doing here with this House resolution, the broadband bill, building the infrastructure bank, we create 100,000 to 250,000 direct and indirect union, good paying, prevailing wage, telecom jobs, okay? We're talking about both on the scale effect and the skill effect. And that's how we build America. And that's what I'm focused on, is how do we build broadband in this country, which we're dependent upon to move us from now into the future.
If I could cut in for a minute.
Yes, we're very pleased and happy and honored to have join us a bit unexpectedly, but gratefully so, Congressman Danny David, who is the sponsor of the National Infrastructure Bank legislation, HR 6422. And Congressman, we're very pleased and honored to have you join us, and would be very appreciative of any comments and statements that you'd like to make to us today.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And let me just say that I am so delighted to hear this discussion, to know that it is taking place, and to know that all of you are indeed involved. I was excited just to hear the last conversation about broadband, because I just introduced another bill about a month or so ago called the Computer Equity Act, which would provide for each person, low income in the country, $10,000 over a lifetime to purchase equipment, and also $1,000 for them to purchase entree into broadband if needed. If they got to do it, this is for individuals. But overall, the discussion in relationship to infrastructure development, I believe, is one of the big opportunities that exist in our country. I'm excited about where we are in terms of the electoral stuff. I don't have any doubt in my mind that we are going to elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I don't have any doubt about that at all. We just got to go out and do it. I say if we can take the Senate, keep the House, and elect a new president, we can do a lot of progressive things in this country. Good to see all of you. Good to know that you're engaged and involved. My staff, who's been working on the infrastructure bill, is so excited about that until he eats and sleeps it every day. As a matter of fact, his name is Caleb Gilchrist, and Caleb never misses a day telling me something about this infrastructure bill, where it is, how it's moving, what it's doing. So thank you all. I'm running off to something else, as many people constantly are, but have a wonderful day, and it's good to have a chance to say hello and keep going. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. A pleasure to have you join us. And thank you so much for stepping up and supporting the legislation and sponsoring it in Congress.
Thank you.
Next, you're welcome. Next, we're going to flip back to the question and have Carl next address it. And we're running under a bit of time constraints, so we're going to ask people to try to be as brief as they can, yet still answer the question. Carl, you're up next to have you describe what pressing infrastructure needs you think exist.
Yeah, no problem. I'll try to keep it very brief. My name is Carl Holland. I'm a state delegate for the DNC, working to bring the party together to support our nominee. I live in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, and as a matter of fact, last week we had like a really big storm hit the area, and a sinkhole opened up on the George Washington Parkway. And sinkholes are a natural thing. However, they also occur when there isn't regular maintenance to the roads as well as our water infrastructure. And so, and this is the nation's capital. So if it is happening here, you can imagine it's happening all over the country, especially our rural areas. So I just think that the National Infrastructure Bank is a very needed piece of legislation to help, build and just maintain the things that we have, and then also build better systems so that we can flourish as a country.
Thanks very much, Carl. Appreciate your answer. Next, Tom, your turn. Take it away.
Welcome, delegates, to the 2020 Democratic National Convention. I'm Thomas Carey. I'm the Westchester Putnam Central Labor Body President here in New York, AFL-CIO. I'm representing labor from New York, and I'm also a United Association of Plumbers and Steamfitters, Local 21 here in New York. The United Association of Plumbers and Steamfitters, they pride themselves on protecting the safety of the nation. And this was apparent during the brothers and sisters in Flint, Michigan's water crisis. Many of our members came out to help many of them. And this is where infrastructure comes into play. We have so many major infrastructure projects. As you hear some of the other panelists talk about, some of our big things, high-speed rail, high-speed internet, roads, bridges. Right here in New York, we just did a $5 billion Mario M. Cuomo bridge named after our former governor and our current governor's dad. Recently, in my neighborhood, we closed down a nuclear power plant, Indian Point's Units 2 and 3, which supplied power to a good part of New York. So now, hopefully, in place of that, they're talking about building a manufacturing and fabrication plant for an offshore wind project. They're going to build the blades, which are roughly 365 feet long. And if they can manufacture those and then send them out to where they need be, that'll be a major improvement and many jobs for the local residents. And the list goes on and on. We talk about airports, roads, bridges, our energy needs. So HR 6422, we need it passed and we need your help. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tom. Next, we're going to go to first Bob and then Jason after they identify themselves to answer this question. America's industries have been in a state of decline for over 30 years. What kind of industries do you think we need? How will they contribute to the infrastructure projects? And how do you see the role of the bank in this? Bob.
Thank you very much. My name is Bob Lynn. I am a retired union organizer with Plumbers and Pipefitters in Toledo, Ohio. And I am the labor coordinator for the National Infrastructure Bank Coalition. The question about what kind of manufacturing, we need all kinds of manufacturing to come back to this country. We have been sold out in the past couple decades when it comes to investment in America. They've chased cheap labor in order to be able to manufacture goods, in order to be able to continue to make increased profits. The important thing that we have to do in this country, in my opinion, is to be able to reinvest in ourselves and our neighbors. It's really important to know what your neighbor does for a living. How many of you really know that? Because neighbors, we have to support our neighbors so they can continue to be able to work and do that. And at the bottom line of what this National Infrastructure Bank is, it's a financing mechanism to be able to invest in America and Americans. We have to figure out how to be able to pay for things to be able to do it. And this bank is that answer at the end of the day. We cannot continue with this pay-as-you-go system and continue to look at the debt as we have to cut costs in order to pay off the debt. The only way we will pay off the debt is to outgrow it. We have to increase productivity. We have to increase all that opportunity out there for us to be able to actually grow out of the debt that we currently have. And that's the only way it'll ever happen. And so with that, I cede to my brother, Jason.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Parker, Council Leader for the Virginia State Building Construction Trades Council, 30-year member of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local Union 1340, 30-year electrician. Well spoken, Bob. When I think about this, what actual manufacturers we need them all. Those are all, when you look at the decline of unionism, one of the big mechanisms for that is the fact that all of these factories left our nation and went and got domiciled somewhere else. And when that happened, I know the IBW, I think, lost 300,000 members from that. So every single manufacturer is a place that will probably be organized and create very real jobs. And with that, you get the development of the person. A lot of things about a union is when you start negotiating for better terms and conditions at a job, you actually begin to develop those workers. And this will be the same with this infrastructure. We cannot get these manufacturers back until we improve our infrastructure. We are dealing with an out-of-date infrastructure. We spend very little compared to our competitors. And for that, we're seeing our manufacturers disappear. And until they come back, it's going to be hard to have a real economy. I think we've gone to the very edge of the experiment of the service economy. It's just not a thing that can, the basis, the plankton, if you will, for an economy is taking a piece of wood, turning it into a rocking chair and selling it to someone because they need it. So for the manufacturers that are like needed desperately, they're all, as far as the bank's going to give a mechanism for taking these municipalities and giving them the opportunity to do what Alfecca spoke of, which is bundle the projects. If you're going to dig up a road, you do everything at once. You find efficiencies in that. And so I think that that's going to free up this piecemeal version of our infrastructure improvement. And, I'm surprised Bob didn't say this, but ultimately, one of the big items that companies look for when they relocate to a place is infrastructure. And so without that great infrastructure, we're not bringing those factories back. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So Bob and Jason, we have a question that we've received from one of the viewers that we're going to ask you to respond to. And the question is this: what are the arguments against creating a national infrastructure bank that you've run up against in Congress? When and how do you think we should address those kinds of concerns and challenges?
Well, I'll take that first. Some of the biggest challenges that I think we face is that too many people think that this is a new idea, that this is really radical. And one of the arguments that we have to be able to make is that this is not a radical idea. This has been done 4 times previously in our history, and it's just different than what we're used to. We have gotten so much into pay as you go, where you have to go and be able to figure out how to finance what's going to happen. This lending program, and I think Stephen was very right, this is a lending program to communities that need the money and financing to be able to make this happen. And I think if we continue to push that this idea is not radical, it's something that's been done, we just have forgotten it and we need to go back to it.
Jason, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, he nailed it. I think there's just, control issues. I would think that that's a natural human condition. And I think that there's a lot of money involved. And with that, you know, people start wanting to be cut in on the deal. And I think this bank may have an effect on the financial sector as far as not a negative impact, but they feel like they're getting cut out of the deal. I would think there's concerns there, but I think they're wrong. There's plenty of businesses that will do fantastic because of this, and it will be independent of the Wall Street issues that we've seen rise and fall and rise and fall over the last couple of decades.
Great, thank you very much. And just to add my opinion and perspective, I see the infrastructure bank's projects and program being ones that are spread across the country to all the different geographic and economic sectors. So there's an egalitarian, so to speak, promotion of economic development across the board. So I think that makes it much more difficult for the opposition to demonize or delegitimize the whole concept. Just my perspective. Next, we're going to go to a question for Stephen and Rudy. The agricultural section and sector of the United States has witnessed a massive increase of farm bankruptcies. 20% of rural hospitals have closed in the middle of a pandemic, and rural broadband barely functions. Please address this, and Stephen, please elaborate on how a Reconstruction Finance Corporation attacked previously the rural crisis in America. Stephen, go ahead.
Can you hear me? Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
I want to first respond to something that the previous spoker said about some of the resistance to the RFC and cutting out banks and from this process. Jesse Jones's RFC always went to bankers first and gave them first chance to respond to these crises. They wanted to support the banks in addressing the different issues that the RFC had to step in to handle because there was no other alternative. So banks can all participate in some of these efforts, just like they did during the Great Depression during the RFC. What it did for farmers is multiple. As I mentioned earlier, it stored their crops when prices were so depressed because of an oversupply. The RFC stored their crops until prices improved. They made loans on those crops. The farmers were able to repay those loans with interest, get their crops and sell them again after prices had increased, and they made money and they saved their farms. The RFC also supplied funds to help people, whether they were in rural areas or in cities, refinance their homes. They help them rebuild them after natural disasters, which happens now all the time, and it happened then. So the RFC basically was a lending mechanism to help people in need. And as I said earlier, in total, it made money for the federal government. It didn't lose money because it made judicious loans. It was a competitor and said, you know, we'll make these loans at a lower interest rate unless somebody else wants to come in and take the paper. So they were very involved in all different kinds of aspects of lending and supporting the economy and people in need. There's one program, if I may take a minute, that I'd like to discuss that addresses some of these issues about infrastructure. How do we help rural citizens? The Reconstruction Finance Corporation brought electricity to rural America through the Rural Electrification Administration. But poor farmers back then did not have money to buy pumps, refrigerators, toasters, and radios. So the RFC stepped in with the Electric Home Farm Administration to help them buy appliances. The farmer would go into a Main Street store, buy a refrigerator, radio, fan. The RFC would reimburse the store for those purchases. The utility company providing the power to that farmer would then add a little charge to the monthly bill of the farmer with a little interest and forward those proceeds to the RFC. The RFC liquidated the program in 1943 after it had served its useful purpose, and according to Jesse Jones, made a tidy profit for the federal government. And that was to help promote power consumption. And I contend that same mechanism can be used today to promote conservation. We can help people retrofit their homes and their buildings so they are energy efficient and storm resistant. That will spur manufacturing, as one of our speakers talked about earlier. It will help reduce fossil fuel consumption and emission at power plants. It will help spur the green energy industry. So there are many mechanisms that the RFC used during the Great Depression that we can adapt today for our critical problems.
Great. Next, I'm going to pass the floor over to Rudy. Rudy, take it away.
Thank you very much, and thank you everybody who's on this panel. My name is Rudy Arredondo. I'm the president of the National Latino Farmers and Ranchers Trade Association. We represent over 75,000 Latino farmers and ranchers throughout the United States. We also incorporate in our organization farm workers who transition into farm ownership, such as our family. You know, we have some small family farms in northwestern Ohio that provide my family with a income, as well as others within. And I'm a big fan of this National Infrastructure Bank because we suffer consequences as a result of the deteriorating infrastructure, the lack of broadband access. As most federal agencies require that any paperwork and any assistance that comes in from those agencies, such as the Farm Service Agency, Natural Resources and Conservation Service, from the USDA, require that you submit your applications, your paperwork through the internet. Well, if you don't have access to the internet, that's a difficult task because some of our folks are operating on dial-up still. And they have to, in order to get cell phone service, they have to go up the hill where they can get a signal. So those things are critical. However, the farmers and ranchers are essential. I mean, everybody eats, correct? So that is a oversight that has really not been addressed. I mean, as a result of the transition of political power from the rural communities that used to be back in the 40s, 50s, and even part of the 60s, that has kind of eroded and transferred over to the suburbs and, of course, to the urban areas. So there's a lot of say, without understanding that without food, we are having to import a significant amount of food now, importing it from other countries, Mexico, Chile, etc. And also some of the farming operations are now owned by the by foreign corporations such as JBS, which is Brazilian owned, and they have the poultry operations, some of the beef. So those are not sustainable, and those are not that's not the way to function. So we have tremendous amount of interest in making sure that this infrastructure, because it's the roads, we are dealing with wildfires in the West. This is not the first time. However, it is more severe, and the droughts, tremendous amount. We need to find ways in which we can transfer some of those resources to those areas which are in need. So, and I'm very happy to and appreciate, Congressman Danny Davis. I used to work with him when I was the head of the Migrant and Rural Community Health Centers. I worked with the National Association of Community Health Centers, and who was very helpful. He was the head of one of the community health centers in Chicago. So thank you very much, Mr. Congressman, for your support, and look forward to continuing to work with, the National Infrastructure Bank Coalition as part of their board membership to try to ensure that we get it through. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rudy. And we hope that answers one of our attendees' question from Sequim, Washington, family farm, as to what the Infrastructure Bank will do to help rebuild rural communities. Next, there's another question that we've received from an attendee. Is the National Infrastructure Bank going to be announced as part of the Democratic Party platform? And if you go to the DNC website, you will find the platform has been posted there. I can't remember exactly the number of pages, but it's something like a 30+ page document. And in there, I believe it's around page 17, you'll see several references as to the building or rebuilding of America's infrastructure and the use of an infrastructure bank. So there is a citation within the platform as to this specific issue, and we have attempted here today, and will continue to do so, to flesh out what the details are of how that looks and how it will function and operate. Next, I would like to have us talk about our railroads. There is an intense debate in the nation on how to approach the issue of railroads, both high speed and passenger. The naysayers say the cost is too high, the projects take a long time to complete, are disruptive, and the payback is minimal. HR 6422 will allocate over $800 billion to build rail of both kinds. How do you answer the critics, and how do you sell this to the American public generally? And we will go to first David Cameron. David, if you could please announce and describe yourself and proceed with answering the question, that would be great.
Great. Thank you very much, Jack. Yes, my name's David Cameron, and I'm the assistant to the director of the Teamsters Rail Conference. We represent about 70,000 locomotive engineers and maintenance of way guys. And we are very supportive of seeing a renaissance of passenger rail in this country. Right now, we have one high-speed rail project in construction, 171 miles in California, going from Merced down to Bakersfield. When it's completed, it will be, for the first phase, go from Los Angeles to San Francisco. This is one of the busiest short-haul flights in the nation. It is also one of the most delay-plagued. About a quarter of the flights are delayed. And high-speed rail will allow you to go from San Francisco to Los Angeles under 3 hours. Now, right now, it takes only about an hour to fly, but you have to get there an hour ahead of time, and then you have to fly into San Francisco. Often that's delayed because of fog, and then you have to take the BART or a taxi ride. So it's equivalent amount of time, and it'll be equivalent amount of cost. In the Northeast corridor, you have the same situation where you can take a Acela from Washington, D.C. to New York City. Takes about 3 hours. You can fly in 1 hour, but you still have the problem is you fly from National and you go into LaGuardia or Kennedy, and then you've got an $80 cab ride to get into the city. So even though it takes 3 hours to take that train, you have 75% of the traffic traveling between those two cities going by train rather than flying. So what we have in the nation, we have 11 high-speed rail corridors. We have going from Houston to Dallas, you've got the Texas Central that is moving forward on getting the permits that they need. And you have Virgin trains going from Las Vegas to Victorville. It will eventually go to Palmdale and connect with the high-speed rail system in California. That is going to begin construction this year. Now, these are intensive projects. The one that's going on in California is about $80 billion. They have the money to complete this first segment from Merced to Bakersfield. But, it takes a lot of resources, and it takes a lot of money, takes a lot of political will to get something like this done. The airports want to see it happen because you don't have a lot of gates. They're at capacity in San Francisco, approaching capacity in Los Angeles, and these short haul flights are the least revenue producing flights in the nation. So if you can reduce the amount of short haul flights that they have, they're also the most polluting because most of the energy you use is taking off and landing. So if you can reduce that, you can open up those gates for more revenue producing long haul flights. So we've, at the Teamsters, we passed a resolution supporting high-speed rail. We haven't taken a position on the HR 6422 yet, but let's get real. We are living on an infrastructure that was invested in, created, and built by our parents and our grandparents. We are neglecting the future generations. We see failing bridges, we see failing dams, and we're facing the environmental catastrophe that's quickly approaching. So the National Infrastructure Bank is a revenue neutral way of approaching and dealing with the infrastructure, woeful condition of our infrastructure and the needs that we need to address.
Great, thanks very much. Next, we're going to pivot to Stan and have him give a brief response also to his take with regard to rail development. Stan.
Unmute. Good day. My name is Stan Forzik. I'm a retired executive in both infrastructure and finance for Amtrak. I also work for an energy supply company, energy consulting firm, and now I'm on the coalition's advisory board. It's an interesting question that has been posed, and we see that the naysayers or the critics are opposed to funding rail transportation. That has been going on since the 1970s when Amtrak had been founded. We have to remember that rail transportation in this country is 200 years old. There are sections of the country that still have the roadbeds that are out there that were built 2 centuries ago. All right. And my take on it is this: we need regional rail quickly because we need to take people off of highways. We need to move those people onto commuter trains. Tara Zarinsky was one of our first speakers, and she's up in the northeast section of Pennsylvania. And those people are craving to get rail transportation to come in from New York City because a lot of them live there. And then they would like trains to go from Scranton, Easton, Bethlehem, to Allentown to Harrisburg. And that's just one section of the country. That eliminates the gridlock that's on Route 22. And it's true, these types of projects take a lot of money. But if you listen to what I spoke about on Monday, I said that everybody focuses in on the money, but not the betterment of the country. And we have to start thinking in terms of the betterment of the country. The bank is a bipartisan legislation that needs to get done because we have to worry about future generations. We don't worry about the now or today. We worry about how are we going to make it to the 22nd century, and rail is needed. And we should be focusing in on commuter corridors so that people can get off of the roads. The other thing on the high-speed rail is extremely expensive, but it does, as David had said, it does compete with the airlines. I know Amtrak, in building the electrification project between New Haven, Connecticut and Boston, Massachusetts, was able to compete with the shuttle between Boston and New York. And the best part about it is, as David says, you're going from downtown in one city to downtown in the other city. I've been talking to people around the country. There are several different designs for high-speed rail, one of which is this hyperlink. It's estimated that, and I know Ohio has documentation out there that they're looking at it to move a hyperlink between Ohio, Pennsylvania, and into New York. If we were to do that from Chicago to New York City, we could cut the travel time down to 2.5 hours. And again, going from downtown one city to another city. So what we're seeing as far as rail is concerned is we need to prioritize what should be done first, what should be done second. But there's plenty of money that the bank can allocate for these things. The role of the bank is not just financing. It's not just lending out money. It's acting as an engineering advisor, an integrator. It's taking the position that it wants to help each municipality, each city, each state, and the federal government. And we have to look at things that way. But rail, although expensive, needs to be done, and it needs to be done to move us to the 22nd century, because we become too complacent with moving within our cars. We need to get off of the roads because the roads are going to become inadequate. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Next, we have a few more questions from our attendees. One was a request to give the amount of the funding for the railroad development, which was $800 billion. Also, Alfeka, we're going to toss you this question from an attendee. How quickly can this project, if passed and signed, be brought up to speed and begin making the necessary loans to move infrastructure projects along? And I'm going to request all the panelists and answers to the questions to be as brief as possible, if you could. Thank you so much. Alfeka.
Thank you very much. Well, infrastructure projects differ by their degree of complication and the degree to which they need land rights and other engineering studies and things like that. So we expect a phasing of these projects as we go across time. As David has said, many of the rail projects, for example, are already up and running. There are plans within the Federal Railroad Administration for what the grid might look like. There'll still need to be a lot of engineering work to do that. But the good thing about these plans so far is that they support economic corridors and moving people, passengers along these economic corridors in order to incentivize economic growth. So those are some of the things that we would look at. I would think that some of the first rollouts for the infrastructure bank would be to do the broadband, because you need the broadband to connect urban and rural areas and to set up the training programs that would help to redeploy workers and that kind of thing. Other projects are already on the books. For example, a lot of planning has been done for the Gateway project. It still needs rights of way and that kind of thing. But if we can provide all of the funding, and if we could come in with these bundled projects that will be efficient in how they deploy, we can minimize infrastructure costs. It might take a few years to roll out projects. Another problem is government regulations, which need to be streamlined a little bit in order to get projects up and running a little bit faster. So this will go at the pace of the infrastructure projects according to what they are, but we think that we could start hiring and doing projects right away, those that are in the can and ready to go.
I'm sorry, there's a second question, Alfeka, that I'm going to ask you to respond to briefly. That is a very good one, and I'm sure you'll be able to respond to it. One big concern are the infrastructure needs of the Native American tribes. These include water, broadband, hospitals, schools. Can we make sure that the needs of Native American communities will be taken care of? Could you address that? I think you're on mute.
There's definitely a component in here for assisting disadvantaged communities, whether they're rural or urban. And the Native American communities are certainly one of those. They've been plagued by a lack of investment in their areas. The first thing, again, to get up for those areas is broadband and remote medical facilities and that kind of thing. But we also want to put in water projects. They're very challenged with water projects. And the creativity that we can use on the example of the Reconstruction Finance Corporation is to set up internal authorities to take on these loans and then pay them back as the communities develop their economies and grow over time. So there's lots to be done. We can use a lot of the federal programs in this regard and then top up the money on the federal programs. We had the same idea for topping up USDA money, which has a large infrastructure in place to help rural communities. And then this bank could provide the actual funding that hasn't been forthcoming from the budget. So there's lots of opportunities to help in this area.
Great, thank you, Alfec. And I'm also going to pivot over to Rudy to give him a very short opportunity to respond to this question regarding Native American needs and development through the bank. Rudy.
Yes, sir. Well, in the tribal communities have a very difficult time in terms of, their, from the agriculture perspective. I mean, there's I believe 78 federally recognized tribes. However, because the land is in trust, so that it can be mortgaged, so that there's some difficulty in terms of the provision of resources to some of those communities, but they are most certainly in need of being able to provide sustainable living opportunities for their communities. So the infrastructure is something that they will be able to obtain loans from as a minimum, because since they are a government, they're their tribal units are considered governments, that they're sovereign governments. So they would be able to obtain loans to be able to fix housing, healthcare provision, be able to provide those that have agricultural land within their reservations to be able to sustain their communities. It's so impoverished, and there needs, for instance, water in the Navajo Nation. Right now they're working on trying to get a water project. However, some of the land has been contaminated with uranium, so it's difficult to try to figure out, and they need the engineering knowledge of folks within the Corps of Engineers to be able to do some of that.
Great, thank you, Rudy. Next, I want to just advise people of our website, which is nibcoalition.com, for you to view at any time and see what information we have compiled that will, I'm sure, help you better understand and give you a more in-depth explanation as to what a national infrastructure bank is about and what it can accomplish. Next, I would like to go through the panelists one by one to ask specifically what it is that you are doing and suggest others do in order to provide support with regard to promoting the National Infrastructure Bank. We think that this is something that we all can support. So let's next go to Tara. Tara, if you could give us just a brief explanation of your ideas about how to promote the bank.
Okay, making sure I'm on. Thank you so much. I think that one of the things that I've tried to do is not only introduce resolutions within my county, but also through the National Association of Counties at the annual convention in Washington, D.C. Having them endorse this resolution and endorse HR 6422 and send up all that support to Congress was really important. I think also one of the things that we can do is educate people as much as we can. I facilitated a number of local Zoom calls and tried to engage unions in locally in the discussion, because this is going to create so many union jobs, and it's a great component of community building, because we're talking about infrastructure that spans across so many different aspects of the community. And so I think it's very important that HR 6422 go through and that we add this to the Democratic platform to establish the National Infrastructure Bank.
Thank you very much, Tara. Next, we're going to go to Erica and again, ask people to try to be as brief as possible. Erica, your thoughts and ideas about how to promote the bank's passage as far as legislation and implementation is concerned.
So I'll be as brief as possible, but give some really great points here. I think that to add on what Tara said, it has to be done through coalition building. And that first starts with signing the endorsement. If you believe in what we're talking about today, if you believe in HR 6422, even if you want to know more, find out how to endorse this, get behind it, talk to your congressperson. This is a grassroots movement, okay? We're starting down here. So let me explain this to you. And I'm big on broadband. I believe in all that we're talking about, but add on what Rudy said. This year, the US fell from the top 10 just for average internet speed globally when speeds are picking up. Just think about that. And when we think about middle to low income communities are the most affected, and you can raise your hand here, here's who's affected: women, the underemployed, rural residents, and those who are often marginalized. So we're talking about communities of color are most affected with education, employment, and healthcare. You have to get involved. We have to connect with people one by one. So even if it's, I love the one thing that Bernie Sanders did in his campaign, and I love that Joe Biden does this also, is going out and talking to the everyday American, getting them on board, because the more we do to call and talk to our city council members, our state representatives, signing those endorsements, reaching out, going to show those videos, putting them on, using social media to build that platform, the more noise we make, the more we can build. And when the US can spend billions of dollars for a space force to send a few Americans to the moon, we can do the same and spend billions of dollars to create millions of jobs for Americans with HR 6422 and grow our country and Americans both nationally and globally. And that's where we want to be going forward. And that matters to the person sitting right here in Toledo, Ohio, all the way to Washington, D.C., that's going to make big decisions in the White House.
Thank you, Erica. Next, I'm going to have the floor go to Carl. Carl, your answer to the question regarding how to promote the National Infrastructure Bank.
Yeah, I believe that each of us has, a network that we are, that is unique to us. Whether you are a member of a union, talk to your union leader, whether you are a member of any community organization. Maybe it's just something like if you're a member of like your PTA or, basically whatever organization that you're a member of, just go ahead and, see if you can talk to people that and just spread the word. I think that that's the best way to get this thing moving. And also, like the last panelist said, call your member of Congress. Even that is enough to just get the ball rolling on this. As many people as we can to support it. I'm politically active, and so I have a lot of people in my political network that I've been talking to about this. And you never know that one conversation that you have might be the one that really gets the ball rolling and really gets the right connection made to make this reality.
Thank you very much, Carl. Next, I'm going to have Tom speak to the question next, and then after that, Jason. Tom, you're up.
Thank you.
Take it away.
I want to thank all the other panelists. This has been a great discussion, and what a better platform than the Democratic National Convention for HR 6422, right? Democrats have always pushed for infrastructure, for good paying jobs. This is the greatest platform that we could ask, right? I make phone calls, I send emails. Sometimes people come back and say, hey, Tom, enough's enough, but I just keep pushing. This is the most important bill. If you're a union member, brother, sister, whatever, get the word out. HR 6422. I have a funny point that I have to stress. In New York City, they still have wooden pipes running underneath the streets of New York City and the suburbs. Just imagine that for 1 second. We're in the 21st century and we're still using wooden pipes in the greatest city of our nation. So I ask every one of you, keep pushing. I'm very excited about HR 6422, and I'm going to keep pushing until this thing passes. God bless you all.
Thank you. And Jason?
Jack, you've done a heck of a job being the maestro here. Everybody's saying it. I mean, it's education and it's lobbying and it's making people make this the new normal. This is a bill, HR 6422, that will transform almost every American life out there before, maybe every American life. And I wanted to thank Stephen for bringing some clarity to the financial side of past banks. I thought that was big. I thought it was a big bit of information. I do appreciate that. And I think those are the forms of communication that's going to change minds out there and hearts out there while we push this bill. And you know, we've had them in the past. Our trade competitors use them. They are successful. And I think the American people and the legislative bodies that represent them will wake up to this.
Next, we're going to have David say a few words on this topic. David.
I'm sorry, you have to repeat the topic. I got a text.
Yeah, no problem. I completely understand. David, what ideas do you have about how to promote the infrastructure bank passage and et cetera?
Right. Well, I think the way that in working with Bob Lynn and the rest of the folks, that the way that they're going about it is kind of ideal, because they're starting at the grassroots and trying to work their way up. And the word is getting out and more people knowing about it. I mean, you could start at the top and just try to get, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer onto it and stuff, but they're kind of busy with other things right now. And it's going to be difficult given we're less than 3 months away from the election, to get anything done this year, as we all know. But with this bill and with Costa's high-speed rail funding bill, with Seth Molin's bill and others, we're tilling the ground for next year. And clearly there is a crying, desperate need for funding for our infrastructure. So I think that in terms of getting the word out, I have an extensive network. Everyone on this panel and most of the people who are listening have extensive networks that they can reach out to, inform. Alfeca and Bob Lynn are always ready. I've had them on different conference calls with different groups, and they're ready to do that to help inform and educate and spread the word.
Great. Thanks so much. Next, Bob, your turn.
Well, I can only reiterate everything that they've just said, but I will tell you this. A small group of motivated people are the only thing that's ever changed anything in this world. And that's what I think we are, and we're going to do it. We have to build the parade. As soon as we build the parade, I guarantee you the politicians and leaders will run to the front and take credit for it. But if we don't build that parade, it's never going to happen. So keep on building that parade, talk to everyone you know, and spread the word.
Thanks so much. Stephen. Stephen, perhaps you're on mute.
Speak about the Reconstruction Finance Corporation and how it can be adapted to address today's problems whenever possible. I submit letters to the editors. I write editorials that are published in the newspaper. For instance, I showed how a new infrastructure bank could respond to the devastation on the Texas Gulf Coast from Hurricane Harvey, or how it can respond today to the devastation of the coronavirus pandemic. I am not trying to push my book. I will send all the royalties directly to the Coalition for the Infrastructure Bank, but I would encourage people to go to my website, stephenfenberg.com, and see about the book I wrote so they can be informed about the potential of the Reconstruction Finance Corporation and how it can be used today to address our pressing problems. The title of the book says it all. It's called Unprecedented Power, Jesse Jones, Capitalism and the Common Good. Thanks for inviting me here today.
It was great to have you, Stephen. Next, we're going to go to Stan and then wrap it up with Alfecca. Stan.
Yes, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. And Stephen, I have read the book and it's an excellent book. I've been doing a lot of things over the course of the last year and a half. I know Alfecca will say the same thing. We've talked to about 225 people down in Congress. We've been to different state capitals, talked to folks at that level. I think the issue is that we have a product here that is for the betterment of the country. We have to move the mindset away from looking at the price tags and concentrate more on the betterment of the country. If we don't do that, then we're always going to be stuck in an impasse because people will want to talk about, well, this costs too much or things like that. We have to change the mindset. I was interested in what Tom had to say about the city of New York and their pipes. We met with the city council in Newark, New Jersey, when they were in the midst of their water crisis. One of the issues that brought me into the fold here with the coalition is the fact that the water systems in this country are getting worse and worse. We spoke in Trenton last year to the Education Committee in the New Jersey Assembly, and basically the thought process there was they were finding too much lead in their water. I don't want my grandchildren's children and their children to come home one day from school, if we get back to school, and have lead poisoning. And I think we all have to think that way. We're going to enter the 22nd century. This bank will come through and get done. And I think we have to exercise all of our energies to get ourselves into that century. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you. Alfecca, we're going to have you go up next. And one of the things that we, in addition, would like to have you answer is a question that has been posted, which is, could you speak to the issue of credit being supplied, which does not come through the appropriation process as far as funding the bank is concerned? So Alfecca, if you could answer that first and then talk about how we can all promote the development of the bank.
Right. So you can look at the history of infrastructure financing over the last 100 years or so to see an answer to that question. The last time around when we had the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, that was the major way that we financed infrastructure. After it went away, we tried to put in the Highway Trust Fund. Through the budget, we can't seem to even keep the Highway Trust Fund inflated because folks are objecting to having taxes to pay for it or that kind of thing. And that's the reason that infrastructure has fallen by the wayside. So Plan C was to try and do public-private partnerships. That works okay for some things like airports where you have user fees coming in that can finance the that could repay for the funds that were borrowed, but doesn't work too well for public infrastructure like roads and bridges and schools. For this, the infrastructure bank is ideally suited because it has the scale to cover everything. I repeat that, it's really large. And B, it has flexibility in providing loans to state and local governments at the lowest interest rates and with flexible repayment schemes that will help them to get out of the hole that they're in right now. So for all these reasons, and it really, another speaker had posed a question about health and safety too. For example, we absolutely must replace pipes that contain lead and are poisoning our children, not only in Flint, but all up and down the East Coast. We absolutely must save tunnels and bridges like the one that goes under the Hudson River. Can you imagine if that tunnel were to collapse where hundreds of thousands of commuters every day go through there. That's certainly a safety issue. And not only that, it's an economic issue too, because 20% of the GDP in the United States is produced in that Northeast corridor. So we want to make sure for all of these reasons that we consider this proposal as probably the only jobs proposal out there and the only way to fully finance infrastructure spending. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Alpaca. Next, I want to comment myself about what this bank brings to the table as far as the community is concerned. Community, I mean across the board. Looking at the participants and supporters of this effort today with the panelists that we have, you can see that it reflects our communities of color across the board. And that is a very, very important point that we need to make in this day and age of Black Lives Matter and the economic consequences that we face with the crisis that's occurred with the pandemic and the statistics that show who and what communities are affected by this. Number one. Number two, there's, as I understand it, specific provisions that's contained in the statute that focuses on development of communities that are economically challenged. Again, this focuses on the people that have been ignored as far as our economy is concerned in the past, and redirects the whole matter of how our economy is developed. Finally, I want to ask the last question to Jason and Bob and Tom about jobs. How many jobs will this create? How will it increase our employment and help us dig our way out of an economy that has over 30 million people unemployed, and yet pending the crisis that state and local governments are going to be having with their budgets and the threatened layoffs that will occur as a result of that. Also the evictions and the bankruptcies that are going to be cascading if Congress doesn't move and make some kind of action happen, which I fear is unlikely. So Bob, you're up next as far as the jobs, and then we're going to be wrapping it up after Jason and Tom.
Well, the predicted amount of jobs, according to a study that's been done by the University of Maryland, estimates that $4 trillion investment will create approximately 25 million jobs. That's a lot of jobs. The thing I always like to emphasize is this: when a dollar gets spent in a community infrastructure, it manifests between $3 and $7 additional investment that goes on. Because if I go to work building a bridge or putting in some plumbing, et cetera, to be able to do that, once I do it, I have money in my pocket. I go to the restaurant, I go to the movie theater, once we get back to it, et cetera, to be able to do it. And those are the things at the end of the day that start to generate that economic income. And so every time it gets done, a dollar invested in a community grows anywhere from 3 to 7 times in that community. And that's important to remember. 4 trillion times 7 is how much? Tremendous amount of money. And that's what we got to keep in mind. Jason, it's up to you.
So one of the things when you have Davis-Bacon attached to a bill like this is Davis-Bacon is a survey-based geographical cost of living or per classification. For example, carpenter, electrician, plumber. So what the nice thing about this is it will create those local jobs. You won't just have this marauding group of workers that come into an area, put in a project, and then suddenly they leave and none of that money sticks around to have velocity. So that is a nice component in addition to what Bob was talking about. And when it comes to the training and stuff, I mean, the trades are very, very prepared for this kind of training. We are scalable as high as you want to go. Usually workload is what dictates how many people we take in to train to become these various crafts. And I think that this bill right here will take people, train them, and from that training, they will begin to get into a habit of self-improvement, and you will see them go on to get, bachelors in sciences and become the architects and become the engineers and the experts in those fields. So this is a great thing for so many careers, for so many localities, and just like the TVA, it can transform an area. and take it right out of poverty and make it viable and prominent. So that's about all I got to say. And thank you for everything, y'all.
Thanks so much. We're going to go next to Tom and then to Erica. Tom.
Hey, thanks, Bob, and thanks, Brother Jason. When we talk about jobs, right, this is the biggest job creator that we're going to see in a long, long time. Post-COVID-19, this is so important, both in the public and the private sector unions, right? We talk about building trades and CWA, our sister from CWA. And let's think about our college students that are facing phenomenal debt, right? They go to college, they're stuck with a big debt. A lot of kids are now turning towards the building trades. It's not just a job now, it's a career. So I'm not knocking college. I mean, I think if you got it, go for it. But this is an alternative, and it's going to be a big plus. We need these jobs. And as Brother Jason said, project labor agreements, Buy American, all these initiatives, and the domino effect that Bob Lynn just talked about, right? When we get done with a job, we spend our money. Most of your construction workers spend it where they make it, right? So if we're making money, that domino effect, it goes right down to the clerk working in the deli, right? Jobs for them, tip money. Who's going to be most affected by this COVID-19 is probably our food service workers. We see it all the time. So hopefully, HR 6422, it needs to pass, and it's going to create jobs long-term down the road, probably for our grandkids. Thank you. Thanks to all the panelists.
Great, thank you. There's a question that came up in the chat. Is this a WPA, a CCC from the 1930s? I think that's exactly what it is. And finally, let's go to Erica, and then we're going to do a 30-second lightning round, so to speak, of all the participants closing out our event today. But first, Erica, on jobs. Thank you.
On jobs. Hi, Jack. Would you mind repeating the question again? I was answering a question in the chat. I'm sorry.
That's quite all right. No, we're just talking about the potential for job creation that results from the passage of an infrastructure bank.
And everyone's already spoke to us, so I hate going last, but I'll do my best here. I think when we talk about Toledo, Ohio, and I can talk about best what's going on here, and I'm sure this is the same for the Midwest everywhere. In Toledo, we have Amtrak, and so we have a big lot of rails here. Very important to have high-speed rail. We talk about creation of jobs. The Midwest has been hard hit, very hard hit in this region. We have lost just so many jobs, and when we talk about good union-paying jobs, the reason why people moved here wasn't because of the weather, obviously, right? People moved to the Midwest because we had really good-paying jobs, high pensions. So we didn't talk about pensions a lot here, but that's important as we're talking about funding for Social Security, that people need pensions on top of having Social Security. So as a lot of free trade agreements happen and our jobs went overseas, we've lost a lot. We don't build in America. And when we talk even about broadband, I want to really emphasize that the internet was made in America. Let's not forget that. It's made in America, but yet we're not number one anymore in even maintaining what we built. So we can talk about the railways, we can talk about our highways, we can talk about our broadband, everything that we built best from our dams, our bridges, that has been copied all over the world. We're no longer doing it best. So that not only built our nation, it built jobs, good paying jobs. When we talk about, and I'm speaking for myself and other people of color, that allowed the middle class to be a realization for me, allowed me to live where I live, allowed me to have education, allowed me to have health care. So for some people, it's just getting a job. For some of us, it's making a life beyond what we had before. So in America, especially here in Toledo, Ohio, for us, it's going to make all the difference of becoming part of the Rust Belt or becoming part of the belt that continues to move this country forward. So let's remember that. And I would like to just say what I started at the beginning with this House bill, when we talk about just $5 billion being added into just broadband, just the job creation, not just direct jobs, but indirect jobs to the telecommunication industry. We have to build that. And we can't think of competition. And I know that Stanley talked about that from the airlines and railway. we have to think about coming together and bridging forward and not pulling apart. We can do it, America. Let's get started. Let's build.
Thank you, Erica. One thing that I would like to add before we go through our lightning round of about 30 seconds, wrapping things up from each of the panelists, is the investments that are being made in infrastructure in comparison to the United States really should make us pause. In China, the percentage of their GNP is invested in infrastructure over 8.5%. The European Economic Community is around 4.5, and here in America, it's around 2%. We are falling behind in the development of our infrastructure. We need to turn this train around, and the vehicle by which to do that is a national infrastructure bank. So lastly, I'm going to go through our panelists, attendees, one by one to give them an opportunity to have 30 seconds to wrap things up. And we'll start off with Alfeka Matardi. Alfeka, you're up. Thanks.
So a major theme of our Democratic Convention has been Build America Back. And we have great objectives in the platform of things that we want to build. We have to have a concrete proposal on board for how we're going to pay for it. This is the one infrastructure bank proposal around that will cover everything, infrastructure in every single state. And in addition to that, will create 25 million new jobs to hire from among those that are currently unemployed. So it is a really great concrete project to assist with that DNC objective. Thank you.
Thank you, Alfeka. Next, we'll have Stephen, who is the author of The Unprecedented Power, Jesse Jones, Capitalism and the Common Good. We really appreciate his joining us today with his expertise and authoritative knowledge about the 1930s and the Depression and the employment of a national investment bank then. Stephen, your thoughts. Thank you. You may be muted. Stephen, we'll come back to you in just a minute. Let's next go to Tom Carey. Tom.
Hey, let's just share the excitement of HR 6422. Let's spread the word. Let's get it out there. Even this morning, 10 o'clock this morning, we're on a conference call with some of my county legislators. She's pushing to get everybody in my county on board and to write a letter of recommendation for HR 6422. That's where we start. We talk to local officials, national officials, our governors, whoever we can, Congress people. Let's get this thing going and let's get America going. God bless you all.
Thank you, Tom. Next, Rudy Arredondo. Rudy, you're up next. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And, Mr. Finberg, I was initially, when I came to Washington back in the 70s, I was a part of the folks who worked for the Farm Credit Organization. And they were cadring with, they met a lot of these WPA folks. So, one of the things that I find in the different networks that I work with is the price tag. When I say $4 trillion, their jaw just falls out. And then, I want to thank my colleague, Alfeka, who has made it so simple in terms of the common person understanding how this is going to work. So, I will be reaching out to some of the networks that I work with and the Western Governors Association, who has a tremendous amount of need for infrastructure remediation and also the least amount of representation on the relevant, House and Senate agriculture committees. So I'm going to make an attempt to try to bring them in. I've been talking to them over the past year, actually, and they have an infrastructure request or a resolution within their organization. But I'm going to try to get them mobilized. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rudy. Next, we're going to go to Carl Holland. Carl, you're up.
All right. Thank you again for allowing me to be part of this discussion. So, as you know, as we all know, the National Infrastructure Bank is in desperate need to help our infrastructure. But as it specifically relates to COVID, I know a lot of folks who don't know if they are going to lose their job, if they're lucky enough to still be employed. One of the things that the National Infrastructure Bank does is it allows job security and good paying jobs with benefits. So people know that they will have a job with dignity. And it'll also give them training and skills that they can use to prosper in various fields. So I think that's one thing we want to keep in mind, that it's in addition to being an infrastructure program, it's also a jobs program, which is really needed, especially now.
Thank you, Carl. Next up, Erica White. Erica.
Hello, 30 seconds. I'll keep it short. I just want to loosely quote FDR, Midwest style. The government should provide as much assistance as it does to its citizens, as it does to corporations and banks. And so that's what this House resolution does right here. Not only are we building America, we are investing in American workers. And I'll say it again, and it may get me in a little trouble, but that's all right. If we can invest in a space force, we can invest in a workforce. America strong.
Thank you, Erica. Next, Stanley Forsythe. Stan.
Let me just put it, I got it. Let me just put an asterisk on your comment about the GDPs of other countries. Let's remember one thing. All of those countries use the Alexander Hamilton model to develop their infrastructures, which are fairly brand new because they were all destroyed in World War II. So I just wanted to make that point. I think we have to move forward, all right, and we have to get more people involved, and we have to change the mindset of what these projects cost. Don't think about the money. Think about the betterment of the country. We need to spend this money to get us to the 22nd century. We need to spend this money for the betterment of the nation as a whole. Thanks for the time.
Thank you, Stan. And it's not only spending the money, it's investing it.
That's correct.
Thank you. And next, Bob Lynn. Bob.
Well, Alexander Hamilton originated the idea of this bank. It's kind of interesting that Hamilton is one of the more popular Broadway plays that are out there, and he's known for that. But I think it's time that Alexander Hamilton, that people get reintroduced to what he actually came up with, the concept for this bank and investing in America. Because we need to invest in ourselves, and I encourage every one of you out there to look through your phone book or whatever you have, your contacts list, to be able to figure out who you can contact to be able to make a difference. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be about person-to-person contact, and we have to do that as a whole to be able to do it. And we have to start to look at our brothers and sisters. We are their keepers, and they are our keepers. And if we're going to do that at the end of the day, we have to invest in ourselves and be able to invest in each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Next, Tara Zrinsky. Tara.
Hi, and thank you so much for inviting me to this panel. I want to say that the thing that I think is most important that drew me to the National Infrastructure Bank was the tool that it provides to address climate change, to transition to a green economy, to build green new job structures, and to reduce our dependency on fossil fuels and transition to renewable energy. We can have charging stations, we can have clean energy buses, and we can deploy renewable energy on a massive grand scale. And I think that's really exciting, and that's why I am supporting HR 6422.
Thank you so much, Tara. Our last two people, plus Stephen at the very end. Next up is Jason Parker, and just want to remind everyone to unmute. Jason, your turn.
Thanks for everybody for having me. You know, the way we've been approaching infrastructure has less than stellar results. I think we need another tool in the tool belt, and that infrastructure bank would do a great job at that and fill in the gaps. I also want to remind everybody that three very important things for business when they relocate is the quality of your education, the quality of your workforce, and the quality of your infrastructure. And this bank takes care of all three of those. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Jason. Next, David Cameron. David, your turn.
Great. Thank you, Jack. Thank
ahead.
you. Alexander Hamilton was the first Secretary of the Treasury under George Washington, and he saw that human nature was self-interested. He created the National Infrastructure Bank as a way of using self-interest for the public good. Successful economies depend on effective and efficient transportation and solid infrastructure. We have been falling behind in this nation. This infrastructure bank bill addresses that problem, gives tools that we need to improve our transportation and improve our infrastructure. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, David. And last but not least, again, the author of The Unprecedented Power, Jesse Jones, Capitalism and the Common Good. Stephen, thank you.
Thank you, Jack. I want to clarify one point quickly that somebody asked about the WPA and the CCC. Those were spending programs as opposed to the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, which was a lending program. And the RFC was so successful, it helped finance the WPA and the CCC. And in my closing remarks, I'd like to say the Reconstruction Finance Corporation restored the nation's economy during the Great Depression, and it militarized industry in time to fight and win World War II. A similar infrastructure bank can restore the vitality of our nation and improve life for all of its citizens. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here today.
And thank you, Stephen. Well, everyone, that concludes our presentation today, and we thank you for joining us. Please learn more about the National Infrastructure Bank at our website, nibcoalition.com, and there it is posted up on the screen, and follow its progress in Congress and throughout the country as support for this major economic policy continues to grow and accelerate throughout the country. Good day, and please don't forget, and make sure you vote and make sure your ballot is appropriately received and counted. Thanks so much.